Welcome to our storytelling sanctuary, where hearts collide and truths unfold. Today, we dive into a millionaire's quest for true love, a tale of deception, redemption, and the courage to bare one's soul. Imagine a golden-haired millionaire, cloaked in a construction worker's guise, chasing a love untainted by wealth. 9 rejections later, he meets a true love woman whose kindness pierces his facade. But when cruel schemes and hidden truths threaten to shatter their bond, will love prevail? Stick with us to unravel secrets that'll leave you breathless. Can a lie spark true devotion? Drop a comment with where you're tuning in from. And if this story moves you, hit that subscribe button to join our journey through more heartfelt tales. Let's step softly into this world of passion and promises, where every twist begs the question, what's the cost of being truly seen? Get cozy, and let's begin. The city skyline glittered like a constellation of ambition, but for Ethan Caldwell, it was a gilded cage. At 34, with golden blonde hair that caught the light and blue eyes that pierced through boardroom bravado, he was the quintessential millionaire CEO. His company, Caldwell Enterprises, commanded a $3.2 billion empire, its name etched on skyscrapers and whispered in elite circles. Yet, as he stood in his penthouse, staring at the cold expanse of glass and steel, Ethan felt like a ghost. Every smile, every touch, every whispered promise in his life had been tainted by his wealth. Friends who angled for favors, lovers who eyed his wallet before his heart, none saw him. The weight of it pressed against his chest, a quiet ache that no luxury could soothe. He'd had enough. 2 weeks ago, over a glass of bourbon that cost more than most people's rent, Ethan made a decision. If he couldn't find love as himself, he'd strip away the trappings and start anew. Thus, Nate Harper was born, a fiction spun from desperation. Nate was an unemployed construction worker, rough around the edges, with calloused hands and a paycheck-to-paycheck existence. Ethan traded his tailored suits for a faded flannel shirt and scuffed boots, both borrowed from a thrift store his assistant Daniel had scouted with a mix of amusement and concern. "You're sure about this, sir?" Daniel had asked, holding up a pair of jeans with a questionable stain. Ethan's jaw tightened. "I've never been surer." The blind dates began with a flicker of hope. Ethan, as Nate, sat through 9 of them, each a study in disappointment. The first woman, a polished lawyer, excused herself to the bathroom when he mentioned tight budgets, and never returned. The second, a fashion influencer, laughed, a sharp, cutting sound, when he admitted he didn't own a car. "You're kidding, right?" she'd said, grabbing her purse. By the fifth, a marketing exec, Ethan's story had smoothed out, but her eyes glazed over at the word unemployed. The seventh handed him a crumpled $10 bill for the bus before faking a phone call. The ninth, a yoga instructor, was the cruelest. She stayed long enough to lecture him on manifesting abundance before bolting. Each rejection stung, not for the dismissal, but for the confirmation. His wealth was his only currency. Now, on the evening of his 10th and final blind date, Ethan sat in a corner booth at the Rusty Spoon, a diner that smelled of coffee and nostalgia. The vinyl seat creaked under him, and the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting a soft glow on his borrowed jacket. He adjusted the collar, feeling absurdly out of place yet tethered to his mission. This was his last shot. If this failed, he'd surrender to the shallow world he'd always known, where love was a transaction and trust a myth. The thought made his stomach churn. The diner's door chime rang, slicing through his thoughts. Ethan looked up, and time seemed to pause. A woman stepped inside, her presence like a warm breeze in a sterile room. Her long, raven black hair cascaded over her shoulders, framing a face that held both strength and softness. Her eyes, a deep hazel, scanned the room with quiet confidence, and her simple green dress hugged her frame without pretense. She wasn't polished like the women Ethan knew, No designer labels, no calculated poise. But she was breathtaking in a way that felt raw, real. She spotted him, and a smile curved her lips, unguarded and bright. "Hi, I'm Lila," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. Her voice was warm, with a slight lilt that made Ethan's pulse quicken. "You must be Nate, right?" He nodded, suddenly aware of how dry his mouth was. "Yeah, that's me. Nice to meet you, Lila." His voice, practiced to shed its boardroom polish, came out rougher than intended. But Lila didn't seem to notice. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and leaned forward, her elbows on the table, as if settling in for a real conversation. The waitress, a wiry woman with a name tag reading Marge, appeared with menus. Lila glanced at hers briefly before setting it down. "I'm just doing coffee tonight," she said, then looked at Ethan with a playful glint. "Unless you're starving, then I'm game for fries." Ethan chuckled, the sound surprising him. "Coffee's good. Maybe we split the fries if we get desperate." "Deal," Lila said, her smile widening. Marge shuffled off, and Lila tilted her head, studying him. "So Nate, what's your story? The dating app said you're in construction, but you don't strike me as the hard hat type." Ethan's heart skipped. He'd rehearsed this, but under her gaze, the lie felt heavier. "I was in construction," he said, keeping his tone casual. "Been between jobs lately, figuring things out. You know how it goes." Lila nodded, no trace of judgment in her eyes. "Oh, I get it. I've had my share of figuring out phases. I teach part-time now, mostly kids who need extra help with reading. It's not glamorous, but it's home." Her words were simple, but they carried a passion that drew Ethan in. "That sounds like more than a job," he said, leaning forward. "What got you into it?" Lila's eyes lit up. "Books saved me growing up. My dad worked long hours and we didn't have much, but stories were my escape. I want that for kids who feel stuck, you know. I'm saving up to start a free literacy program one day." She laughed, almost shy. "Big dreams, small budget." Ethan felt a pang, not just admiration, but a longing to tell her he could fund her dream in a heartbeat. Instead, he said, "That's not small. It's the kind of thing that changes lives." She blushed, waving him off. "You're sweet. Your turn. What's Nate Harper dreaming about these days?" He hesitated, caught off guard by her sincerity. "Honestly, just trying to find something real. Life's been complicated." Lila's gaze softened, as if she heard the truth beneath his vagueness. "Real is hard to come by," she said quietly. "But it's worth looking for." Their coffee arrived, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. Lila shared quirks. Her knack for memorizing poetry, her habit of naming stray cats. And Ethan found himself laughing, genuinely, for the first time in weeks. When the bill came, Lila reached for her wallet. "Let's split it," she said. "I know how tough it can be to make ends meet." The gesture, so simple, hit Ethan like a thunderbolt. No one had ever cared about his ability to pay, not when they knew his name. He insisted on covering it, his voice softer than he meant. "I got this one. Next time, you're on." "Next time, huh?" Lila grinned, scribbling her number on a napkin. "Don't lose this, Nate. I had fun." As she walked out, her hair catching the diner's warm light, Ethan clutched the napkin like a lifeline. For the first time, he felt seen, not as a millionaire, but as a man. But across the street, hidden in the shadows of a sleek black car, Victoria Caldwell watched, her phone pressed to her ear. "Daniel," she said sharply, "find out what my brother's up to. He's not himself." Ethan, oblivious, stepped into the cool night air, his heart alight with possibility. Lila was different, but the lie he'd built stood between them, a fragile masquerade that could crumble with a single misstep. He didn't know it yet, But the path to her heart would demand every ounce of his courage. And the truth, he wasn't ready to face. The napkin with Lila's number burned a hole in Ethan's pocket as he walked the city streets, the neon glow of storefronts blurring into the night. The memory of her smile, unguarded, radiant, lingered like a melody he couldn't shake. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a spark that wasn't tied to a contract or a conquest. But the weight of his lie as Nate Harper, the unemployed construction worker, pressed heavier with every step. He'd built a fragile bridge to Lila's heart, and one wrong move could send it crumbling. By the time he reached his penthouse, the thrill of their diner meeting had tangled with dread. He couldn't keep this up forever, but could he risk the truth so soon? 3 days later, Ethan found himself dialing her number, his thumb hesitating over the call button. What if she sensed the cracks in his story? What if she was like the others, waiting for a glimpse of wealth to shift her gaze? He shook off the thought. Lila was different. She had to be. The phone rang twice before her voice, warm as a hearth, answered. "Nate, I was wondering if you'd chickened out." He laughed, the sound easing his nerves. "Not a chance. Are you free on Friday? I owe you those fries." "Only if you're ready to lose at naming state capitals," she teased. 7 o'clock, same diner? "Deal," Ethan said, his grin audible. As he hung up, a flicker of guilt stirred. He was diving deeper into the masquerade, but the pull of Lila's light was too strong to resist. Friday evening, the rusty spoon buzzed with life, waitresses weaving through tables, the clink of dishes mingling with laughter. Ethan arrived early, his flannel shirt slightly less wrinkled thanks to Daniel's reluctant ironing. He slid into their booth, the vinyl squeaking under him, and scanned the menu to steady his pulse. Lila's presence had a way of unraveling him, and he needed to keep Nate's story straight. No slip-ups about private jets or boardroom deals. The door chimed, and Lila swept in, her raven black hair loose and catching the diner's soft light. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, but her effortless grace made the room feel brighter. "Hope you brought your A-game, Nate," she said, sliding across from him, her hazel eyes dancing with mischief. "I've been practicing my capitals," Ethan grinned, leaning forward. "You're on. Loser pays for the fries." Marge, the waitress, appeared with a knowing smirk. "Back so soon. You two want the usual coffee, or are we spicing it up tonight?" "Coffee and a plate of fries to share," Lila said, then glanced at Ethan. "Unless you're feeling wild." "Fries are plenty wild for me," he replied, earning a laugh from Lila that warmed him more than the coffee ever could. As Marge shuffled off, Lila propped her chin on her hand, studying him. "So, Nate, tell me something new. What's a construction guy do when he's not constructing?" Ethan's mind raced. He'd rehearsed this, but her gaze, curious, not probing, made the lie feel like a betrayal. "Been doing odd jobs," he said, keeping his tone light. "Fixing fences, hauling lumber. Keeps me busy while I figure out what's next." Lila nodded, no trace of skepticism. "That's brave, you know. Most people cling to what's safe, even if it's killing them. What's next for you, dream-wise?" The question caught him off guard. As Ethan Caldwell, his dreams were calculated: mergers, expansions, legacy. As Nate, he had to dig deeper. "I guess of finding a place where I belong," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "Somewhere I'm enough, just as I am." Lila's expression softened, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "That's a good dream," she said quietly. "I get it. Growing up, I felt like I was always chasing enough. Dad worked himself to the bone, and I swore I'd make a life that meant something more than a paycheck." Ethan leaned in, drawn to her honesty. "Your literacy program, that's more than a paycheck. How'd you decide to go for it?" She smiled, a mix of pride and shyness. I saw kids in my classes. Bright but stuck, you know. No books at home, no one to read to them. I started small, tutoring after hours. But I want to build something bigger. A place where any kid can learn for free. It's a long shot, but I'm stubborn. It's not a long shot, Ethan said, his voice firm. It's necessary. You're giving them a way out. He caught himself, worried he'd sounded too polished. But Lila just beamed. You get it, she said. Most people think it's a pipe dream. Okay, your turn. What's the weirdest job you ever had? Ethan scrambled, inventing a tale about cleaning gutters for a grumpy old man who paid in homemade jam. Lila laughed, her head tilting back, and the sound was a balm to his fraying nerves. They traded stories, her quirks unfolding like petals. She could recite Emily Dickinson by heart, once adopted a stray cat she named Shakespeare, and had a knack for burning toast. Ethan, weaving half-truths about Nate's life, found himself wishing he could shed the disguise and tell her everything. When the fries arrived, golden and steaming, Lila proposed a game. State capitals, go, I'll start. Montana, Helena. She popped a fry in her mouth, eyes gleaming. Wyoming, Cheyenne, Ethan shot back, grabbing a fry. They went back and forth, laughter erupting when Lila blanked on Delaware. Wilmington, she finally shouted, triumphant. You hesitated, Ethan teased. I win. Fries are on you. Cheater, she said, tossing a fry at him. He caught it midair, and their laughter drew glances from nearby tables. For a moment, the world shrank to just them, the diner's hum fading into a soft blur. As the night wound down, Lila reached for her wallet, but Ethan waved her off. I got it. Construction's slow, but I'm not that broke. He hated the lie, but her grateful smile made it bearable. Next time's on me, she said, standing. She hesitated, then added, I'm glad you called, Nate. This was nice. More than nice, he said, his voice low. She blushed, tucking her hair behind her ear, and handed him a fresh napkin with her address scribbled on it. Come over next week. I make a mean pasta. Deal? Deal, Ethan said, his heart racing. As she walked out, her silhouette framed by the diner's neon sign, he felt a surge of hope and fear. Lila was a rare flame, but his deception was a shadow growing longer with every moment. Unseen, Victoria Caldwell sat in her car across the street, her phone pressed to her ear. Daniel, I saw him with some woman at a diner, dressed like a laborer. Get me everything on her name, job, and past. Ethan's playing a dangerous game, and I want to know why. Her voice was ice, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of worry. Ethan, clutching the napkin, stepped into the night, unaware of the storm brewing behind him. Lila's warmth had lit a path forward, but the masquerade was far from over, and the truth was a tide he couldn't outrun forever. The city hummed beyond Lila's modest apartment, but inside, it was a sanctuary of warmth and quiet promise. Ethan Caldwell, still cloaked as Nate Harper, stood at her doorstep, clutching a bouquet of wildflowers he'd bought from a street vendor. The scent of lavender and daisies grounded him, a small shield against the lie that gnawed at his conscience. Since their diner date, Lila's laughter and unguarded kindness had haunted him, weaving into his thoughts like a song he couldn't silence. But with every step closer to her, the weight of his deception grew, a fault line threatening to crack. Tonight, he'd dine in her world, and the thought both thrilled and terrified him. Lila opened the door, her raven black hair spilling over a simple sweater, her hazel eyes bright with welcome. Nate, you made it, she said, her smile disarming the knot in his chest. And flowers. You're spoiling me. Couldn't show up empty-handed, Ethan said, his voice rougher than usual, the construction worker's drawl he'd practiced. He handed her the bouquet, their fingers brushing, and a spark shot through him. Lila's apartment was small but alive. Books stacked on every surface, a faded quilt draped over a couch, and a faint aroma of garlic and herbs drifting from the kitchen. It was the opposite of his sterile penthouse, and yet it felt like home. "Come in, make yourself comfy," Lila said, gesturing to a wooden table set for two. "Hope you're hungry. I went all out with my mom's pasta recipe." She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Ethan to take in the space. A photo on the shelf caught his eye. A younger Lila with a tired but proud man, likely her father, both grinning in front of a crumbling school. The image tugged at him, a reminder of her roots and the dreams she'd shared at the diner. He settled at the table, the chair creaking under him, and Lila returned with a steaming bowl of fettuccine tossed in creamy sauce. "Dig in," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "But fair warning, I expect a full review. 5 stars or bust." Ethan twirled the pasta, the first bite a burst of comfort. "This is incredible," he said, meaning it. "You could open a restaurant," Lila laughed, waving him off. "Nah, I'd rather feed kids than critics. Speaking of, I had a student today recite her first poem. Nearly cried, I was so proud." Her face glowed, and Ethan leaned in, captivated by her passion. "Tell me about her," he said, eager to keep her talking, to delay the inevitable questions about Nate. Lila launched into a story about a shy girl who'd found her voice through words, her hands animated, her voice alive with purpose. Ethan listened, but a part of him ached. As Ethan Caldwell, he could fund her literacy program in a heartbeat, yet as Nate, he could only nod and offer empty encouragement. "Your turn," Lila said, setting down her fork. "What's the best day you've had lately? No pressure, but I'm expecting something good." Ethan's mind scrambled. The truth, closing a $50 million deal or jetting to Paris for a gala, would shatter his cover. He sipped his water, buying time. "Probably a day I spent fixing up a community garden," he said, spinning a half-truth from a charity event he'd funded anonymously. Just dirt, plants, and kids running around. Felt real. Lila's eyes softened. "That's beautiful, Nate. You've got a good heart." Her words landed like a blade, cutting through his facade. He wanted to confess, to tell her he was Ethan Caldwell, a millionaire who'd lied to find someone like her. But the fear of losing her, of seeing her warmth turn to betrayal, kept him silent. They ate, the conversation flowing like a river. Lila shared more about her childhood, her father's long hours as a janitor, her mother's death when she was 10, and the books that became her refuge. "I used to hide in the library," she said, a wistful smile playing on her lips. "Jane Austen, Langston Hughes, they were my friends when things got tough." Ethan seized the chance to pivot. "You mentioned poetry at the diner. Got a favorite?" Her eyes lit up. "Oh, you're in for it now." She cleared her throat and recited a stanza from Dickinson, her voice steady and reverent. "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul." The words hung in the air, and Ethan felt them settle into him, a quiet call to courage he wasn't ready to answer. "You're good," he said, his voice low. "Ever think about performing?" "Only for stray cats and my students," she said, laughing. "What about you? Any hidden talents?" He chuckled, dodging the truth of his piano lessons or fluency in 3 languages. "I'm decent at fixing leaky faucets. Does that count?" "Absolutely," Lila said, her grin infectious. "Every hero needs a wrench." The word hero stung, a reminder of the cowardice behind his lie. They cleared the table together, their shoulders brushing as they moved to the sink, and the domestic ease of it made Ethan's heart ache for a life he couldn't yet claim. As they settled on the couch with mugs of tea, Lila's tone shifted, more serious. "Nate, can I ask something? You don't have to answer, but what's holding you back? You seem like you're searching for something." The question pierced him. She saw too much, her gaze peeling back layers he'd hidden, even from himself. "I've spent a lot of time being what people expect," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Now I'm trying to figure out who I am when no one's watching." Lila nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That's hard, but you're here, trying. That's more than most." She reached out, squeezing his hand, and the warmth of her touch sent a jolt through him. For a moment, he imagined telling her everything: the empire, the loneliness, the masquerade. But the risk was too great, and the moment passed. The night ended too soon. At the door, Lila hugged him, her arms lingering. "You're different, Nate," she whispered. "Don't disappear on me, okay?" "Wouldn't dream of it," he said, his voice thick. She pressed a slip of paper into his hand, her address again, with a doodle of a cat. "For next time," she said, smiling. Ethan stepped into the cool night, the city's pulse a stark contrast to the warmth he'd left behind. Lila's apartment had felt like a glimpse of a life he craved, but his lie was a shadow trailing him. As he slid into the borrowed sedan, he didn't see the sleek black car parked a block away. Victoria Caldwell, her face taut with suspicion, watched him drive off. "Daniel," she said into her phone, her voice sharp. "I need a name for the woman he's with, and I need it now." Ethan clutched the paper with Lila's doodle, his heart a battlefield of hope and fear. Lila was a beacon, but the truth was a storm gathering on the horizon, and he wasn't sure he could outrun it. The slip of paper with Lila's cat doodle sat on Ethan's nightstand, a talisman of the warmth he'd found in her apartment. Days had passed since their dinner, each moment replaying in his mind. Her laughter, her poetry, the way her hand felt in his. As Nate Harper, he'd tasted a life unburdened by his millionaire status, but the lie that made it possible gnawed at him like a splinter. Lila's question, "What's holding you back?" echoed, a challenge he wasn't ready to meet. Yet her latest call had sparked a new thrill, an invitation to her high school reunion. "I want to show you off," she'd said, her voice bubbling with excitement. Ethan, torn between joy and dread, agreed, knowing the crowd would test his masquerade like never before. Friday evening, Ethan pulled up to Lila's apartment in a rusty sedan borrowed from his assistant, Daniel, who'd muttered, "This is a bad idea, sir," while handing over the keys. The car's engine sputtered, a far cry from Ethan's sleek Porsche, but it fit Nate's story. Lila emerged, radiant in a thrift store dress of deep emerald, her raven black hair cascading freely. "You clean up nice, Nate," she teased, sliding into the passenger seat. "Ready to meet my old crew?" "Born ready," Ethan lied, his stomach nodding. He adjusted his faded jacket, the thrift store fabric itching against his skin, and drove toward the upscale restaurant hosting the reunion. Lila chatted about her classmates, distant acquaintances mostly, with a few she'd once called friends. "They're not my people anymore," she admitted. "But I'm curious. Plus, I get to bring you." Her smile was a lifeline, but Ethan's mind raced. A room full of strangers meant more eyes to spot cracks in his facade. The restaurant, Aurora's, loomed ahead, its glass facade gleaming under city lights. Ethan's pulse quickened. He owned it, a flagship of Caldwell Enterprises, though no one here would know. Inside, chandeliers cast a golden glow over tables draped in white linen, and the air buzzed with clinking glasses and forced laughter. Lila squeezed his hand as they entered, her confidence steadying him. But the room's energy shifted as heads turned, eyes narrowing at Lila's simple dress and Ethan's worn clothes. Whispers slithered through the crowd, and Ethan sensed a trap closing in. A woman in a sequined gown approached, her smile sharp as a blade. "Lila Monroe! You came," she said, her tone dripping with mock surprise. "And this is—" "Nate," Lila said, her chin high. "My date. Nate, this is Courtney, class president. Courtney's gaze raked over Ethan's jacket, her lips twitching. Charming, she said, already turning away. Lila's hand tightened on his, a silent, "We're fine." But Ethan's jaw clenched. Courtney's dismissal was just the beginning. The crowd parted, revealing a man striding toward them, his tailored suit screaming wealth. Ryan Baxter, Lila's ex-boyfriend, exuded arrogance, his dark hair slicked back, his smirk a weapon. "Well, well, Lila," he drawled, ignoring Ethan. "Still chasing fairy tales? Thought you'd at least upgrade your arm candy." His eyes flicked to Ethan, sizing him up like a predator. "What do you do, pal? Janitor?" "Construction," Ethan said, his voice low. Nate's drawl steady despite the fire in his chest. "Between jobs," Ryan laughed, a harsh bark. "Figures. Lila always had a soft spot for strays." The crowd tittered, and Ethan felt Lila stiffen beside him. But she stepped forward, her gaze unflinching. "Nate's worth more than your penthouse, Ryan," she said, her voice clear. "Kindness beats cash any day." The room hushed, and Ethan's heart swelled with admiration. Lila wasn't just defending him. She was claiming him, unashamed, in a den of vipers. Courtney reappeared, flanked by two women dripping in designer labels. "Lila, tell us about your life," she said, her tone laced with pity. "Still teaching snotty kids, or did you finally get a real job?" Her friends giggled, and Ryan leaned in, eager for blood. "I teach kids to read," Lila said, unfazed. "It's more real than anything you're wearing." She turned to Ethan, her smile genuine. "Nate gets it. He helped fix up a community garden. Kids loved him." Her pride cut through the room's venom, but Ethan's guilt surged. She was painting a hero he wasn't, not as Nate. Ryan snorted. "A gardener? Perfect. Lila, you're slumming it now." He gestured to his date, a model thin blonde in diamonds. "This is Vanessa. She doesn't date losers." Vanessa smirked, and the crowd's laughter grew bolder. Ethan's hands balled into fists, but Lila's touch on his arm kept him grounded. "Let's grab a drink," Lila said, steering him toward the bar. "Alone," she whispered. "Ignore them. They're just loud." Her eyes searched his, and Ethan saw a flicker of vulnerability. She wasn't immune to their cruelty, but she refused to bend. "You're incredible," he said, meaning it. "How do you stay so calm?" "Practice," she said, her smile wry. "And you being here helps." She leaned closer, her hair brushing his shoulder, and Ethan's resolve wavered. He wanted to tell her the truth. "I'm Ethan Caldwell. I own this place." I could shut them up with a word, but the fear of losing her silenced him. Back at the tables, the ambush intensified. Courtney and her clique circled, flaunting their wealthy partners, a banker, a tech bro, a lawyer, each boasting louder than the last. "My fiancé got us a yacht for our anniversary," one bragged. Ryan, not to be outdone, crowed about his new Miami condo. "What's your guy got, Lila?" "A toolbox," he sneered. Lila laughed, undaunted. "Nate's got stories that don't need a price tag," she said, launching into a tale of Nate, helping a kid plant sunflowers. Her voice carried, drawing a few genuine smiles from the crowd. But Ryan's scowl deepened. Ethan marveled at her strength, but his anger simmered. These people didn't deserve her light. Ryan leaned in, his voice venomous. "Face it, Lila. You're a charity case, and this guy's a nobody. You're embarrassing yourself." The words landed like a slap, and Lila's smile faltered for a split second. Ethan's restraint snapped. He opened his mouth, ready to signal the manager and end this charade, when a server approached, oblivious to the tension. "Sir, ma'am, your table's ready," the server said, gesturing to a quieter corner. Lila nodded, but Ethan's eyes locked on Ryan, who smirked as if he'd won. The restaurant's polished elegance felt suffocating, a reminder of the world Ethan had fled. He could expose himself now, reveal his ownership, and crush Ryan's ego. But what would that do to Lila? She'd learn his lie in the worst way, surrounded by vipers. As they moved to their table, Lila squeezed his hand. "Thanks for sticking it out," she said softly. "This is worse than I thought." Her vulnerability pierced him, and Ethan vowed to protect her, even if it meant swallowing his pride. But across the room, a figure watched. Victoria Caldwell, disguised in a sleek dress, her phone capturing every moment. "He's in deep," she murmured to her investigator on the line. "Find out who she is, and fast." Ethan sat across from Lila, her resilience a beacon in the storm. The reunion was a trap, but it had shown him her strength and his weakness. The truth loomed closer, a reckoning he couldn't delay forever. For now, he'd be her Nate. But the masquerade was fraying, and the night was far from over. The air in Aurora's restaurant crackled with malice, the reunion's polished veneer stripped away by the venom of Lila's former classmates. Ethan Caldwell, still cloaked as Nate Harper, sat across from Lila at their new table, his knuckles white around a glass of water. The sting of Ryan Baxter's words, "charity case, nobody," lingered like a bruise. But it was Lila's fleeting vulnerability that cut deepest. Her smile had wavered, a crack in her armor, and Ethan burned to shield her. Yet his secret, the millionaire truth beneath his thrift store jacket, tethered him to silence. Exposing himself now could crush Ryan and his cronies, but at what cost to Lila? The thought of her trust shattering in this viper's nest kept his lips sealed, though his resolve strained with every sneer from across the room. Lila sipped her wine, her hazel eyes scanning the crowd before meeting his. "You okay, Nate?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "You look like you're plotting a jailbreak," Ethan forced a chuckle, loosening his grip on the glass. "Just not a fan of bullies," he said, his Nate drawl rough but firm. "You're handling this like a pro," she shrugged, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "They're loud, but they're predictable. Ryan's been a jerk since junior year. I'm just glad you're here." Her hand brushed his, a quiet anchor, and Ethan's heart ached with the weight of her faith in Nate. She saw a man who longed to be honest, grounded, but every moment he played the part widened the chasm between them. The crowd's chatter surged as Courtney, the sequined ringleader, stood, clinking her glass for attention. "Let's share some updates," she chirped, her smile predatory. "Who's living the dream since high school?" The room buzzed, and Ethan sensed the trap tightening. Courtney's eyes locked on Lila, gleaming with intent. "Lila, why don't you start? Tell us about your teaching gig." Lila stood, her emerald dress catching the chandelier's glow, her posture unyielding. "I teach kids to read," she said, her voice clear, carrying over the murmurs. "Kids who don't have much but they've got heart. I'm saving up to open a free literacy program, so they can dream bigger than their circumstances." Her words were a quiet fire, and a few faces softened, drawn to her sincerity. Ethan's chest swelled with pride, but Courtney's smirk didn't falter. "Cute," Courtney said, her tone dripping with condescension. "But let's be real, teaching's a dead end. No offense, Lila, but you're wasting your spark." She gestured to her fiancé, a smug banker flashing a Rolex. "Some of us aimed higher." The room tittered, and Ryan seized the moment, his voice slicing through. "Yeah, Lila, you're still playing saint. And your guy?" He jerked a thumb at Ethan. "What's he got? A hammer and a prayer?" Laughter erupted, sharp and cruel, and Ethan's blood boiled. He shifted, ready to stand. But Lila's hand gripped his under the table, a silent plea to stay calm. She rose again, her gaze locking on Ryan. "Nate's got more integrity than you'll ever buy," she said, her voice steady as steel. "He helps people, not just his ego. Like when he fixed up a garden for kids, taught them to grow things, not just take. Her words painted a hero Ethan hadn't earned, and guilt twisted in his gut. But her pride in him, unwavering in this hostile room, was a light he clung to. Ryan's face reddened, his smirk faltering. "A gardener," he scoffed. "Perfect for you, Lila. You both belong in the dirt." The crowd's laughter grew bolder, and Courtney's clique piled on, their voices a chorus of mockery. "What's next, Lila? A trailer park?" one sneered. Ethan's restraint frayed, his jaw tight enough to crack. He could end this, signal the manager, reveal he owned Aurora's, and watch Ryan choke on his own arrogance. But Lila's hand, still in his, anchored him. She didn't need his power. She needed him by her side. Lila faced the room, her chin high. "You can laugh," she said, her voice cutting through the din. "But I'd rather build something real than flaunt someone else's money." She turned to Ethan, her smile soft but fierce. "Nate gets that. That's why I'm with him." The room stilled, her words a quiet thunder. Even Courtney hesitated, caught off guard by Lila's resolve. Ethan stared, awestruck. She was a force unbowed by their cruelty, and he was falling harder with every word. Ryan, unwilling to concede, stepped closer, his voice low and venomous. "You're delusional, Lila. You're a nobody, and he's less than that. Keep dreaming, but you'll never be us." His words landed like a blade, and Lila's eyes flickered with hurt, a shadow passing over her face. Ethan's control snapped. He stood, his chair scraping loudly, his voice low but lethal. "You're wrong," he said, Nate's drawl edged with steel. "She's worth 10 of you, and you know it." The room froze, Ryan's smirk twitching. Before he could retort, a woman in a sleek dress, Victoria Caldwell, unnoticed until now, slipped from her corner table, her phone discreetly recording. Her eyes narrowed, calculating as she murmured into her earpiece. "He's protective. Dig deeper on her." Ethan, oblivious to his sister's presence, locked eyes with Ryan, daring him to push further. But Lila tugged his sleeve, her voice urgent. "Nate, let's get some air." They stepped onto the restaurant's balcony, the city's hum a stark contrast to the venom inside. Lila leaned against the railing, her breath uneven. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know it'd be this bad." "Don't apologize," Ethan said, his voice softening. "You were incredible in there. They're just scared of you." He meant it. Her strength was a beacon, illuminating his own cowardice. He wanted to tell her the truth, to confess he could silence Ryan with a word, but the fear of losing her kept him mute. Lila turned, her eyes searching his. "You didn't have to stand up for me, but you did. Why?" "Because I love you," he thought, the words clawing at his throat. Instead, he said, "Because you're worth it, and they don't get to dim you." Her gaze softened, and she stepped closer, her hand resting on his chest. For a moment, the world shrank to just them, the city's lights a distant blur. Back inside, Ryan watched from the window, his jaw tight. Courtney whispered to her clique, their eyes glinting with new schemes. Victoria, still in the shadows, ended her call, her lips curling. "He's in trouble," she said to herself. Ethan, holding Lila's gaze, felt the night shift. A storm was coming, and his masquerade was a fragile shield against it. Lila's strength had carried them through, but the truth loomed, a reckoning he could no longer dodge. The balcony's cool air did little to quell the fire in Ethan Caldwell's chest. Lila's hand rested on his heart, her touch a fragile tether against the storm of the reunion's cruelty. Inside Aurora's, Ryan Baxter's venom and Courtney's sneers still echoed, but Lila's resilience, her unyielding light in the face of their malice, had anchored him. Yet, as Nate Harper, Ethan stood on a precipice. Her strength demanded his honesty, but the fear of shattering her trust kept his secret locked tight. The city's distant hum felt like a countdown, and every second he delayed widened the chasm between them. He had to act, or lose her to the lie he'd spun. Lila's hazel eyes searched his, soft but piercing. "You're shaking, Nate," she said, her voice a quiet lifeline. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Ethan swallowed, his throat dry. "Just hate seeing them hurt you," he said, the half-truth bitter on his tongue. He wanted to confess. "I'm Ethan Caldwell. This is my restaurant. I've lied to you." But the words choked him. Her faith in Nate was a gift he couldn't bear to break. Not here, not now. She smiled, a flicker of defiance returning. "They're not worth our night. Let's go back in, show them we're not running." Her courage was a blade, cutting through his hesitation. He nodded, taking her hand, but as they turned toward the glass doors, Ryan's silhouette loomed inside, his smirk a taunt. Ethan's restraint, frayed by the evening's onslaught, snapped like a brittle thread. They re-entered the restaurant, the chandeliers casting long shadows over the crowd. Courtney's clique whispered, their eyes glinting with fresh ammunition. Ryan, leaning against a table, called out, "Back for more, Lila? Or is your charity case dragging you down?" The room laughed, a cruel chorus, and Ethan's vision narrowed. Lila squeezed his hand, her voice low. "Ignore him, Nate." But Ryan pressed closer, his voice dripping with scorn. "You're pathetic, man. Can't even afford a decent jacket and you're with her? Lila, you could have had me. Real money, real status. Instead, you're slumming it with this loser." His words were a match to Ethan's fuse, and the millionaire's control shattered. Enough was enough. Ethan's eyes flicked to the restaurant manager, a discreet figure hovering near the bar. With a subtle nod, he signaled the moment he dreaded and craved. The manager, recognizing the gesture, approached swiftly, his voice deferential. "Mr. Caldwell, is everything to your satisfaction?" The room froze. Glasses stopped clinking, whispers died, and all eyes turned to Ethan. Lila's hand slipped from his, her breath catching. Ryan's smirk vanished, his face paling. Courtney's wine glass trembled in her grip. Ethan stood taller, shedding Nate's slouch, his voice clear and commanding. "My name is Ethan Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Enterprises. This is my restaurant. I posed as Nate Harper to find someone who'd value me for who I am, not my wealth." He turned to Lila, whose eyes widened with shock, a storm of hurt and betrayal brewing. "Lila Monroe is that person?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ryan staggered back, his bravado crumbling. "You're... what?" he stammered. But Ethan ignored him, his gaze locked on Lila. Her face was a mask of disbelief, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. The weight of his lie crashed over him, but there was no turning back. "I'm sorry I lied," Ethan said, his voice softening, raw with urgency. "I was scared. Every relationship I've had was poisoned by money. People saw my name, not me. Then I met you, Lila. You saw me. Your kindness, your heart, your dreams, they're real, and I fell for you. My feelings aren't a lie, I swear." He stepped closer, the room fading to a blur. "I love you." The crowd murmured, some in awe, others in scorn, but Ethan didn't care. Lila's eyes glistened, a mix of anger and pain. Before she could respond, he acted on instinct, pulling her into a fierce, desperate kiss. Her lips were stiff at first, then softened for a heartbeat, a flicker of the warmth they'd shared. But she pulled back, her hands pushing against his chest, her voice a broken whisper. You lied to me." The room spun back into focus. Ryan's shocked face, Courtney's open-mouthed stare, and Victoria Caldwell's calculating eyes from the shadows, her phone still recording. Lila stepped back, her dress shimmering under the lights, her expression a wound Ethan had inflicted. "I need air," she said, turning toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. "Lila, wait!" Ethan called, starting after her, but she didn't stop. The crowd parted, their whispers a rising tide. Ryan, recovering, muttered, "Some stunt, rich boy," but Ethan barely heard. He pushed through the doors, the night air hitting him like a slap. Lila was halfway down the street, her figure small against the city's glow. He ran, catching her arm gently. "Please, let me explain." She spun, tears streaking her face. "Explain what, Nate, or Ethan? You built everything we had on a lie. I told you about my life, my dreams, and you played me." Her voice cracked, each word a dagger. "I didn't play you," Ethan said, his voice raw. "I was scared you'd change if you knew. Everyone does. But you're different, Lila. You cared about me when I was nobody. That's why I kept going." "You made me a fool," she said, her voice barely audible. "I stood up for you in there, and it was all a game." She pulled her arm free, stepping back. "I need time. Don't follow me." Ethan watched her walk away, her silhouette swallowed by the city's pulse. His chest ached. The truth he'd unveiled a double-edged sword. He'd silenced Ryan, but at what cost? Back at Aurora's, Victoria slipped out, her voice low on her phone. "He's blown it. Get me everything on Lila Monroe. Family, debts, secrets. Ethan's in over his head." Ethan stood alone, the neon signs flickering above. Lila's trust, the only thing he'd ever truly wanted, lay in pieces. The masquerade was over, but the battle for her heart had just begun. He'd exposed himself to the world, but could he prove to Lila that his love was real? The night stretched on, and the answer hung just out of reach, a star obscured by the city's glare. The city's neon pulse felt hollow as Ethan Caldwell stood frozen, watching Lila Monroe vanish into the night. Her tear-streaked face and broken whisper, "I need time," carved a wound deeper than any boardroom loss. The truth, unveiled so boldly in Aurora's to silence her tormentors, had shattered the fragile trust he'd built as Nate Harper. Lila's footsteps echoed in his mind, each one a reminder of the lie that had brought them together and now threatened to tear them apart. Ethan's millionaire world, with its glittering facades, offered no solace. He'd bared his soul, but the cost was her heart, and the emptiness left him adrift. Back at his penthouse, Ethan paced, the napkin with Lila's cat doodle crumpled in his fist. Sleep eluded him, replaced by visions of her hurt, her trust in Nate betrayed. His phone buzzed. Victoria, his sister, no doubt ready to gloat. "You've made a mess, Ethan," her voicemail hissed. "End this farce before it tanks the company." He deleted it, her warnings irrelevant. The company, his fortune, meant nothing without Lila. He had to win her back, not as a millionaire, but as the man she'd believed in. Dawn broke, gray and heavy. Ethan drove to Lila's apartment, the borrowed sedan creaking under his urgency. He knocked, heart pounding, but the door stayed shut. A neighbor, watering plants, eyed him. "She's at work," the woman said, pity in her voice. "Looked rough this morning." Ethan nodded, guilt twisting like a knife. Lila was teaching, pouring her heart into kids despite her pain. He couldn't barge in, not yet. Instead, he found her at the community center, where she tutored, peering through a window like a thief. Lila sat with a group of children, her raven black hair tied back, her smile strained but warm as she guided a boy through a book. Her strength, even now, floored him. Ethan slipped away, determined to prove himself. He contacted the center anonymously, offering a grant for her literacy program, enough to start her dream without revealing his hand. It was a start, but not enough. Days turned to weeks, each one a test of patience. Ethan sent texts. "I'm sorry, I'll wait, please talk to me." But Lila's silence was deafening. He threw himself into her world, showing up at the center to carry books, fix shelves, anything to be near her. The kids took to him, calling him Mr. Nate, a bittersweet reminder of his lie. Lila watched, her expression unreadable, but she didn't send him away. One afternoon, as he stacked chairs, she spoke, her voice cool. "You don't have to do this, Ethan." "I want to," he said, meeting her gaze. "Not for show, for you." Her eyes flickered, but she turned away, the wall between them intact. Victoria's pressure mounted. "The board's uneasy," she warned at a tense lunch. "Your stunt at Aurora's is a PR nightmare. Drop this woman or you'll lose everything." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I'd rather lose the company than her," Victoria scoffed, but her eyes betrayed worry. She doubled down, her investigator digging into Lila's past. Debts, family, anything to exploit. Ethan, unaware, focused on Lila, his only anchor. A breakthrough came at a community event, a poetry reading Lila organized for her students. Ethan volunteered, hauling tables under a starlit park. Lila, in a simple dress, directed kids with quiet grace, but her glances at him held a new softness. After the event, she approached, holding a book. "The kids want you to read with us next time," she said, her voice tentative. "If you're sticking around." "I'm not going anywhere," Ethan said, his heart racing. She nodded, a ghost of a smile breaking through. "No more lies, Ethan. I mean it." The words were a lifeline, and he seized them. Their connection rebuilt slowly, like a house rising from ruins. Ethan joined her classes, his humor charming the kids, his presence a quiet apology. He shared stories, true ones, about his lonely childhood, his fear of never being enough. Lila listened, her guard lowering. One night, under a canopy of stars, they read Dickinson together, her voice weaving with his. "Hope is the thing with feathers." Their eyes met, and she leaned into him, her breath warm. "I missed you," she whispered, "but I'm scared." "I'll earn your trust," he vowed, kissing her softly. The world stilled, their spark reigniting, fragile but fierce. Ryan Baxter, humiliated at the reunion, resurfaced, spreading rumors about Lila's gold digging on social media. The community rallied, dismissing his lies, but Lila's hurt lingered. Ethan, enraged, wanted to sue, but Lila stopped him. "Let him fade," she said. "We're stronger than his noise." Her wisdom grounded him, and he marveled at her grace. 6 months later, Ethan planned a surprise. On a rooftop draped in fairy lights, he knelt, a sapphire ring gleaming in his hand. "Lila, you're my home," he said, voice thick. "Marry me, not the millionaire but me." Tears fell as she nodded, whispering, "Yes." Their kiss was a promise, sealed under the stars. The wedding was lavish yet heartfelt, a public celebration of their journey. Lila, radiant in a flowing gown, walked to Ethan, his blonde hair glowing under the sun. They vowed truth, love, and resilience. A year later, their son Noah filled their home with laughter. Lila's literacy program thrived, transforming lives, and Victoria, softened by their bond, doted on Noah. Ethan, once a ghost in his own life, found purpose in their family, built on honesty and love. The lie that had nearly broken them had forged something unbreakable, a testament to the heart's capacity to rebuild. What a journey Ethan and Lila have taken us on. A roller coaster of lies, love, and redemption that reminds us what truly matters. Did their story tug at your heart? Drop your thoughts in the comments, rate it from 0 to 10, and tell us where you're listening from. Your voices make these tales come alive, and we're so grateful for every one of you joining us in this cozy corner of stories. If you love this, hit subscribe and ring that bell for more heartfelt adventures. Until next time, keep chasing your own true love, and we'll meet again soon with another tale to warm your soul. Thank you, and good night.